I never thought a stepdad could tell me that he loved me, and not just me, my kids too. In that moment, every boundary I had ever known shattered, and I realized my family would never be what I thought it was. I had to make a choice, protect myself and my children, or keep enduring. That was the moment everything changed. But to understand why this happened, you need to hear about my childhood, a childhood that few could ever imagine. I was the youngest of 4 siblings. When I was 9, my parents got divorced. Soon after, my mum remarried a man who would become my They let us choose who we wanted to live with. My siblings all chose our dad, seeking stability and safety, and me. I wanted to stay with my mum. Not because I particularly wanted to, but because I was afraid of leaving her alone. Afraid of leaving her in a world she couldn't handle by herself. But living with my mom and stepdad meant stepping into a completely different world. A world dominated by alcohol and anger. My stepdad was an alcoholic. When he drank, he became violent, unpredictable, even sometimes completely out of control. I remember coming home to find him passed out in the yard, sometimes not even wearing clothes. Weeks of normalcy were punctuated by weeks of chaos. The air in the house was always tense. I learned to walk lightly, speak softly, trying not to trigger his anger. Our life was a constant balancing act. Money ran out. Sometimes we didn't even have food or electricity. I, the youngest, felt like I had to protect my mum and keep things normal in whatever way I could. I stayed silent, endured, and adapted to the constant uncertainty. Many nights I curled up alone, hugging my pillow and quietly crying, telling myself, I have to be strong. I can't cry in front of anyone. Then, at 15, everything changed. My birthday, my 16-year-old brother came over to celebrate. I gave him my bed and slept on the couch. The next morning, I woke up to find him unresponsive. My heart stopped. I screamed, I called for help, and the world felt like it was collapsing around me. By the time the ambulance arrived, my hands were ice cold, my legs shaking, my heart pounding with sheer terror. He survived, but with a severe brain injury. Part of my brother, the person he was gone forever. My mum and stepdad went with him in the ambulance, leaving me, a 15-year-old, alone in a silent house, facing fear, guilt, and helplessness. In that moment, I realized I had to grow up fast. I had to protect myself and the people I loved, because no one else would. After that day, my stepdad sank deeper into alcohol. My mum struggled with her mental health, sometimes even wanting to give up entirely. I stayed by her side in hospitals, made the calls, arranged treatment, carrying responsibilities no 15-year-old should ever have to bear. I cared for my mum, worried about my brother, and faced constant fear of losing him again. Those years taught me one vital lesson. Sometimes there is no one to save you. Sometimes survival means you have to save yourself. I developed a survival instinct, a resilience I hadn't asked for. But it was the only way to keep going. Many nights I would sit alone in my room, listening to the rain tapping against the window, thinking about my brother, my mum, my stepdad. I would ask myself, when will family feel safe? When will I be able to breathe without fear of anger, instability, or another shock from someone I trusted? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew that all I had gone through had forged me, prepared me for even bigger challenges to come. Challenges I could never have imagined, and that would come from the person I once thought of as part of my family. When I think back to my teenage years, It wasn't just the chaos at home that shaped me. It was the realization that I had to stand on my own. After my brother's overdose, after watching my mum struggle with her mental health, I understood early on I couldn't rely on anyone to fix my life. I had to fix it myself. By the time I graduated high school, I had made a silent promise to myself. No matter what happened, I would create a safe space for myself. I threw myself into school, working part-time jobs to save money. College was my escape, a place where I could breathe, where I could carve out a life that didn't revolve around fear and instability. I met my husband in my early 20s. Getting married at 20 was not easy. My stepdad was furious. He accused me of putting my mum through this and claimed I was selfish. But for me, it was simple. I had lived too long under the weight of other people's chaos to let it dictate my future. I said yes, and I built my life. Even after marriage, the past never really left. We had discussions about whether my parents should move in with us once we were on our feet. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could help pull them out of their struggles. But the reality quickly proved me wrong. My stepdad would get drunk immediately, sometimes falling over, making the house unsafe for our child. I realized I couldn't allow that kind of chaos to invade the life I had worked so hard to create. My mum would never apologize. She claimed she had done nothing wrong, and yet the tension never faded. Despite everything, I tried to maintain some contact. Our relationship had ups and downs, and I thought maybe, in time, things could normalize. But deep down, I knew that old patterns die hard. Then came the call. My mum rang me, her voice trembling, telling me she and my stepdad were planning to divorce. She asked if she could move in with us. I hadn't even heard any mention of divorce before that. My first instinct was to help her. I wanted to protect her, just as I had spent my entire life trying to protect my family. I told my husband about it, and he agreed we could have her stay in the basement with her own space. But when I arrived at her house, she had a different plan. She said she needed to do her laundry first. I offered, "You can do laundry at our place. We can get the dogs later. Right now, let's just get you out of here and settled." She refused, saying she wanted to do things right this time. I was frustrated, but I tried to be patient. Maybe, I thought, this was the moment for honesty, for setting boundaries with my I sat down with him outside. I told him I wanted him to be involved with my kids, but he needed treatment, rehab for his drinking. He had already had 2 pints that morning, and yet he seemed oddly calm. Then he said it. Something I never could have imagined. He told me he was in love with me, with my body, with my children. He said he needed someone like me and asked me to tell him what he needed to do to make it work. I froze. My stomach turned. This was a man who had been a father figure to me, a stepdad, not a lover. I stood up and told him the conversation was over. Rahab, that was the only thing that mattered. I called my mum and told her everything. Her response: "He's been drinking." He didn't mean it. That was it. No discussion, no acknowledgement, just sweeping it aside. The next day, my mom did stay at our house for one night. She told my kids she'd have a sleepover with them, then vanished before I got home. Later, she insisted they were working things out, that he was going to rehab. When I tried to talk to her about boundaries and expectations, she shut it down. She said I wasn't allowed to yell at her, that it was her choice. And the discussion was over, and that's when the real conflict started. She began attacking my husband, a man who had done nothing but support me and my decisions, calling him arrogant, lazy, and making her uncomfortable. I asked him to let me handle it, and he agreed. He stayed out of it completely. Our conversation escalated. She accused me of being selfish, of prioritizing my own family over hers. She said grandparents don't go to houses. Grandchildren are meant to go to theirs. She brought up parties we had attended instead of visiting her. I reminded her that she never came to our kids' sports games, that her absence said a lot. She dismissed it, claiming she didn't realize anything was required. By the end, we weren't speaking. I was furious. I had spent my life accommodating, looking the other way, and trying to protect a family that repeatedly hurt me. But now, my own children were involved. I knew I couldn't risk it for them. I set boundaries, firm and clear. My husband suggested therapy to help me process everything. It wasn't just about my past anymore. It was about protecting my family, and finally, about standing up for myself. What I thought would be helping my mum quickly turned into a nightmare I was completely unprepared for. Just a few days after that conversation, I realized that nothing would ever be as simple as I had hoped. My stepdad, the man I once looked up to as a father figure, had crossed every boundary. He not only confessed feelings for me, but also mentioned my kids, the children I love more than anything. My chest tightened. Nausea, shock, and fear collided inside me, making it hard to breathe. One thing was clear. I had to set boundaries, and I had to do it immediately. I called my mum, hoping she would understand. But her reaction was nothing like I expected. He was drunk. "Don't make a big deal out of it," she said. No acknowledgement, no apology. She just shifted the responsibility onto me. I felt like I was losing my mind. After all the years I had spent protecting her, taking care of her in the hospital, she was now ignoring one of the most serious behaviors I had ever witnessed. The next day, my mom came to our house. Just for one night, but what happened made everything more complicated than ever. She told my kids she would have a sleepover with them, then disappeared before I even got home. I realized that even in small actions, she always manipulated things to her way. Never considering my family's feelings or safety, I tried to stay calm. I set clear boundaries. My mum must stay in her own space, and my stepdad must go to treatment. But instead of cooperating, my mum started attacking my husband, a man who had done nothing wrong. She called him arrogant, lazy, and making her uncomfortable. I asked him to stay out of it because I wanted to handle it myself. He respected that, but the tension still weighed heavily in the house. Every conversation escalated quickly. My mum accused me of being selfish, of prioritizing my own family over hers. She said, grandparents don't go to the kids' house. Grandchildren are supposed to go to theirs, and even brought up parties we attended instead of visiting her to prove my thoughtlessness. I reminded her that she had never attended my kids' sports games, that her absence spoke volumes, but she ignored it, saying she didn't realize any of it was required. In that moment, I felt everything collapse. I realized that my whole life I had endured too much. I had protected them, looked the other way at wrongdoing, and tried to maintain a family that continually hurt me. But now, my own kids were affected. I knew I could no longer tolerate it. I had to stand up. I set strict boundaries. My stepdad must go to treatment before having any contact with my kids. My mum must respect my small family and stop attacking my husband. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly had control over my own life. My husband suggested therapy to help me process all the emotions, anger, fear, the emotional betrayal caused by my stepdad and mum. I realized this wasn't just about family anymore. It was about protecting my family and ultimately learning to stand up for myself in the end. I understood that what had happened was not my fault, and I no longer had the responsibility to endure or protect people who continuously hurt me. I had to protect those I truly love, myself and my kids. And deep down, I knew that if I didn't establish firm boundaries now, I would never have peace, and my children would remain vulnerable to the toxic behaviors of my old family. This was a painful but necessary lesson. Sometimes, to survive, you have to stand up, and no one has the right to impose their misplaced emotions or harmful behaviors on you. After the shock of my stepdad's confession and the explosive fight with my mum, I realized that if I didn't learn to set boundaries, my life would continue to be consumed by this toxic cycle. There was no other choice. My kids, my family, and myself, we all needed me to stand firm. The first few days were overwhelming. Every time I thought about saying no to my mum, guilt surged through me. I had grown up as someone who always endured, always tried to please everyone, and now I had to learn to stand up for myself. I realized that years of patience and tolerance had made me lose my own strength and voice. I started by clearly defining what I would and wouldn't accept. I wrote down a list of boundaries. My stepdad cannot have any contact with my kids until he completes treatment. My mum must respect my family's space, not attack my husband, and not interfere in my decisions. All visits must be prearranged, in a safe and controlled environment. Setting these boundaries wasn't just about speaking up. It was about enforcing them consistently. Every time my mum called or texted, I reminded myself that I didn't have to react. I learned to stay calm, breathe deeply, and not let my emotions dictate my actions. I realized that boundaries are not just words. They are how you act and remain firm in your decisions. At first, the pressure was intense. Each call or message from my mum felt like a test of my resolve. My heart would race, fear surged through me. But I kept telling myself, no one has the right to control your emotions anymore. You have the right to stand up and protect yourself. Learning to say no and stick to it wasn't easy. But little by little, I started to feel my inner strength returning, alongside setting boundaries. I realized I needed to process my own emotions. I started therapy, sharing all my fears, anger, and the years of emotional trauma I had carried. I spoke about sleepless nights at my mum's hospital bedside, about the helplessness I felt watching my stepdad lose control, and about the countless times I had to step in to protect myself. For the first time in my life, I was truly heard, without judgment, and guided on how to release guilt and understand that enduring too much in the past was not healthy. I also began teaching my kids about safety and boundaries, not in a negative or fear-inducing way, but so they could understand that even adults we love sometimes need to protect themselves. I explained that everyone has the right to say no and keep themselves safe, even when it comes to parents or relatives. I realized that teaching my children about boundaries also reinforced my own strength and determination. Through this process, I discovered something important. Independence isn't just about finances or career. It's emotional and mental. I learned to say no without guilt, to protect my family from toxic behaviors, and to understand that no one has the right to impose their misplaced emotions or abusive behaviors on me. As days passed, I could feel the change within myself. When my mom called challenging phone calls, I no longer felt tense. When my stepdad messaged or tried to manipulate, I no longer felt fear. I learned to approach every situation with distance, analyze it, and act in the best interest of myself and my children. I spent a lot of time reflecting on myself. I wrote in a journal, noting my emotions each day, from anger and disappointment to small moments of pride. I realized that true strength does not come from avoidance or endurance, but from understanding your emotions, setting boundaries, and protecting your family. After everything that had happened, I thought that setting boundaries would bring some stability. But reality was completely different. The tension had never eased. If anything, things were about to get more intense than ever. One afternoon, my mom called and said she wanted to meet to sort everything out. I knew this was her way of testing my boundaries. I agreed, but only if the meeting took place at my house, with my husband and children nearby. The moment my mom walked in, the atmosphere was thick with tension. She started by complaining about life and everything my stepdad had done. I listened, trying to remain composed. But the moment she shifted to attacking my husband, calling him lazy, arrogant, and selfish, I stood up. My voice was firmer than ever. He is not responsible for your problems or my stepdad's. We have set clear boundaries. If you cannot respect that, this meeting ends now. Mom lowered her voice, trying to guilt-trip me. You're selfish. You only think of your own family. I've suffered so much already. I took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eyes. You have suffered, yes, but that does not give you the right to force me to endure this. I am no longer a child for you to manipulate. My stepdad appeared shortly after, still carrying traces of alcohol. He tried to act friendly, but his words were inappropriate. He brought up needing me again, attempting to soften the situation with flattery. I felt fear, disgust, and anger all at once. I stood my ground and said firmly, "You need treatment. You need to learn to respect boundaries. Nothing else is acceptable." In that moment, everything went silent. I could feel the tension fill the room, but for the first time, I felt my own power. I didn't flinch, I wasn't intimidated, and I didn't give in. Mum continued to test me, asking questions about prioritizing my own family or why my kids weren't brought to visit her more often. I answered calmly, "I have tried to maintain contact and give you opportunities to see the kids, but I cannot let it jeopardize their safety and stability. These boundaries are non-negotiable." The entire meeting ended without a major argument, but I knew this was just the beginning. I had faced them and stood firm, but more challenges were inevitable. The important thing was that I had learned to stay calm, maintain boundaries, and protect my family. No matter who tried to manipulate or threaten me after that confrontation, I felt a strange mix of relief and strength. Relief because I had learned to protect myself. Strength because I realized the true power of setting boundaries and emotional independence. I began to understand that from now on, I could face any difficult situation without fear. In the days that followed, I spent time reflecting and journaling my emotions. I realized that true strength doesn't come from avoidance, but from understanding your emotions, standing up for your family, and enforcing boundaries. I began to feel more confident in every decision, whether it involved my mum, stepdad, or raising my children. After all the tension, confrontations, and boundary testing. I realized that I not only needed to protect my family physically, but also had to deal with the deep emotional consequences these relationships left behind. The fear, anger, guilt, and anxiety I had carried for so long needed to be faced and resolved. I understood that if I didn't confront these emotions, any effort to set boundaries would only be temporary, easily broken by future challenges. I started by looking inward. Childhood memories rushed back, witnessing my mum and stepdad fight, sleepless nights at my mum's hospital bedside, and the helplessness of having to protect myself and my siblings. Each memory carried its own pain, reminding me that enduring for too long had left deep psychological scars. I had to acknowledge all these emotions instead of burying them, or they would continue to weigh on me forever. Therapy became a safe space where I could face the past. I learned to distinguish between feelings and actions. I had the right to feel anger, disappointment, or even resentment toward my mum or stepdad, but I didn't have to act on those feelings. I also learned to release the constant guilt. I wasn't responsible for the adult's behavior, and I wasn't selfish for protecting myself and my children. During therapy, I also confronted the chaotic feelings connected to my stepdad: disgust, fear, and heartbreak at seeing the father figure I once trusted so deeply be so flawed. Accepting him as a flawed human being rather than expecting immediate change helped me feel less pressure and gave me control over my own emotions. At the same time, I spent a lot of time journaling, recording my daily emotions from anger and disappointment to moments of pride when I stood firm with my boundaries. Writing helped me realize that true strength doesn't come from enduring or pleasing others, but from recognizing your emotions and acting deliberately and consciously. I wrote about confrontations, about standing up when my mum attacked my husband, about the mix of fear and empowerment I felt the first time I refused to be manipulated. Regarding my relationship with my mum, I began making important decisions. I understood that I couldn't control them. I could only control how I reacted. I had the right to choose the level of contact. I didn't need to cut ties completely, but I could limit it to protect my family's peace. Consistency was key. Breaking a boundary even once would undo all previous efforts. I started having direct conversations with my mum, but from a safe distance. I expressed my perspective without arguing or retaliating. Each time she tried to make me feel guilty, I reminded myself that maintaining boundaries was to protect myself and my children. At first, she was displeased, but I remained firm. I realized that consistency was the only way to create real change. I also learned to take care of myself and my family. I spent time with my children, my husband, and myself. Walks in the park, reading in the evenings, meditating, or simply sitting quietly and listening to my feelings without judgment. I realized that my emotional safety and my children's well-being were the top priorities, and only when I was at peace could my family truly be happy. I also began redefining my relationship with my I determined that his going to treatment was important, but any contact with my children had to be within safe, controlled boundaries. I learned to observe, not to trust hastily, and to stay vigilant against any words or actions that could manipulate me. I understood that his change was his responsibility, not mine. Through all these experiences, I realized one fundamental truth: emotional independence and clear boundaries are the foundation of a safe and happy family. I began to view my relationships with my mum and stepdad with maturity, not out of hatred, but to protect myself and my children, and to choose whether to connect or limit contact in a healthy way. As days went by, I felt more at peace with myself. I was no longer controlled by the past or by negative emotions. I had learned to face them, process the psychological aftermath, and make conscious decisions about my important relationships. I felt stronger, more confident, and ready to move forward to the final episode, where everything would be summarized, lessons drawn, and the path forward for my family and myself would be clearly established. After all the years of challenges, confrontations, and pain, I found myself in a moment of calm yet strength, a place where the past, present, and future intersected, and I could finally look back with clarity. The relationships that once caused me so much suffering with my mum, my stepdad, and even with myself were now viewed in a different light. I started by accepting the entirety of my past. I acknowledged the traumas, the fears, the anger, and the disappointments I had endured over the years. Instead of running from them or trying to forget, I faced them head. I realized that true strength isn't about feeling no pain, but about how we rise after being knocked down and act with awareness, without letting negative emotions control us. I also accepted that some people in my life would not change in the ways I hoped. My mum and stepdad would have their own limitations, their own choices, and wouldn't always put my happiness or my children's first. This realization didn't make me weak. Rather, it allowed me to detach from excessive responsibility and create a safe life for my family. Throughout this journey, I discovered the value of boundaries and emotional independence. I understood that setting limits isn't about hatred, it's about love. Love for myself, love for my children, and protecting them from negative influences. Every decision to keep a distance or limit contact with my mum or stepdad was made not out of resentment, but out of mindfulness and responsibility. I also realized the power of forgiveness, not forgiving harmful actions, but forgiving myself for having endured, for having been hurt, for having been vulnerable at times. Forgiving myself lifted an emotional weight I had carried for years, an open space for peace and happiness in the present. A crucial part of this closure was reflecting on my relationship with my children. I knew that the choices I made didn't just affect me, they directly impacted their emotions, safety, and development. I chose to nurture an environment full of love, safety, and stability. Every smile, every peaceful moment in our family reinforced the truth that all efforts and decisions to maintain boundaries were worth it. Regarding my mum, I chose to maintain controlled boundaries. I didn't expect too much, but I was willing to stay in contact at a safe level. Regarding my stepdad, I observed from a distance, allowing him to seek treatment if he wanted. But any interaction with my children was strictly within safe limits. I realized that keeping myself and my family safe mattered more than any pressure from others. The story closes with a feeling of both relief and strength. Relief because I had learned to protect myself and my children, and strength because I recognized that true power lies in maintaining boundaries, preserving emotional independence, and choosing your own life without being manipulated. I was no longer afraid of the past or complicated relationships. I stepped forward with confidence, peace, and a determination to safeguard my family's happiness. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned was, we cannot change other people, but we can choose how we respond, protect ourselves, and decide what is best for us and our families. The past may have been painful, but it also became the foundation for growth, for strength, and for loving myself fully. And so, the story ends, but the journey of living, learning, and protecting my family's happiness continues with self-determination, awareness, and love.